Hi everyone! So this video tutorial is going to walk you through just the preliminary steps to creating your designated ELD lesson plan. Ideally, you'll want to use this template here. If you've already created your lesson plan, your designated ELD lesson, and used the traditional lesson plan template, the one that you normally use for your clinical practice observations, that's okay. You don't have to redo it. That one's just has a little bit more moving pieces. This one's a little more condensed. So if you haven't created it yet, please use this template. I'm going to go over a sample, but just kind of looking at the blank template here first, you're going to fill in all this preliminary information on what grade level, your school site, the date of the lesson, how long it's going to be. You're going to want to identify the proficiency levels and the levels of support. So if you remember, and I don't have it opened yet, so I need to quickly, if you remember in the standards framework, you can go back to the video tutorial I created for navigating the ELD standards framework. But if you remember, there are the proficiency levels and then levels of support. So if we go to the proficiency levels section, you're going to see the emerging, expanding, and bridging. Let me go down to the matrix. Here we go. So here's the three levels of proficiency. We've got emerging, expanding, and bridging. And then down here are the levels of support. So substantial, moderate, light, and occasional. So you're going to want to identify both of those. You're going to come up with a corresponding content topic, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You'll need to identify two ELD standards, one from part 1 and one from part 2. So if we go back to the framework, and I'm just going to go to a grade level very quickly. Back to the table of contents. I guess I could have scrolled the other way and gotten to the standards before. Goodness. All right, here we are. So let's just go to kindergarten. So remember in my ELD, navigating the ELD standards framework tutorial, I showed you there are two parts for each grade level standard. We have part 1, interacting in meaningful ways, and then these are the standards under part 1, and then part 2, learning about how English works. Now, remember, these are the condensed standards, so you don't want to get the standard from here. You want to keep going, and here we go. Part 1, and then these are the actual standards. So once you identify which proficiency level and which level of support, then you'll come to your grade level standards and choose one of the standards from the appropriate proficiency level. I had started creating a lesson plan. I'll have to see where I put it. But anyways, go back to the blank template. And then you're going to come up with your language objective, identify some language academic language that you're going to be focusing on, your assessment piece. Now with your traditional lesson plans, the observations, you have to come up with, your formative and summative. For this one, it could be a very informal assessment, but it has to be specific and detailed. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Then you have the language scaffolds and strategies, materials. Now here's where you're going to describe the lesson in detail. The before, during, and after. How are you going to introduce the lesson? What are you going to do during the lesson? Like how are students going to engage in the lesson? And the after. How are you going to assess them? Now part of this assignment, this is a 20-point assignment, is the reflection section. So please make sure you answer each of these questions very with as much detail and insight as you can. I don't know, I don't like the underline there. Yeah, so you have 4 questions. Once you create your lesson, you're going to give the lesson, and then you're going to reflect on it, and you'll submit this paper for your assignment in Canvas. Okay, so let's take a look at the sample here. So this is a kindergarten lesson. It's going to be about 30 minutes long. So yeah, for these designated ELD lessons, they can be anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes in length. For this one, we're choosing emerging proficiency level with substantial support. So the two ELD standards are going to be recount experiences using a select set of keywords. And the keywords are identified down here under academic language. And you'll notice I crossed out the part of the standard that I'm not using. So remember, you want to copy and paste the entire standard. So you see grade level K, part 1, C12 and then copy and paste the entire standard description and then just cross out what you're not going to focus on in that standard. Part 2 standard is combine clauses and basic ways to make connections between ideas in shared language activities guided by the teacher and sometimes independently. I'm going to come back to the corresponding content topic in a minute. The language objective using these 2 standards is students will orally explain a cause and effect relationship using because, and so that's part of the select set of keywords. And students will predict cause and effect relationship using the if-then construction. So the corresponding content topic is basically what subject or topic will you be using to support students in this language objective. So remember, in a designated ELD lesson, the focus is the language objective. But you need some kind of content that students are going to interact with or engage in that's going to allow them to practice that language objective. So for this one, the corresponding content topic is students will conduct an investigation to compare the effects of different strengths or different directions of pushes and pulls on the motion of an object. So they're going to actually use realia, little objects, and conduct little investigations on pushing and pulling those objects. The main goal, again, though, is the language objective, how they're accurately and appropriately using the language that you have identified. This is just the activity that's going to allow the students to practice their language skills. So down here, you'll see the function for academic language is predict and explain, some of the forms, cause and effect, the gender pronouns. We're not really going to be using that for this lesson. Related discourse, the if-then construction. For the assessment, I will informally assess students' English language development by listening closely to their responses with appropriate use of the following. So this is that language objective. While students are engaging in that investigation of pushing and pulling objects, they're going to be talking. And they're going to be talking to each other, they're going to be talking to me. And what I'm looking for, so in an assessment piece, you've got to have that measurable piece. What are you specifically looking for? Don't just say you're going to observe students, because we have no idea what that means. What are you looking for? So include the specifics here. So this is what I'm looking for. That the students are using this sentence stem here. The blank moved because blank pushed it. Okay, so, and it could be an object, you know, the Matchbox car moved because Braden pushed it. Okay, I'm also going to be looking for their use of the if-then construction in relation to the push-pull investigation. So after we investigate some push and pull objects, then I'm going to move into the second activity, and I'm going to ask them, if I push this object, then, and then they can finish what will happen. Or they can create their own if-then statements. So that's my assessment. Down here, the language scaffold and our strategies. One scaffold is realia. Anytime we can use actual objects, that's a great support for English language learners. It's going to support their academic language and their English language development. Sentence starters. The 2 sentence starters that I had up there, the blank moved because, and the if-then. We're going to have a chart paper, so we would call this like an anchor chart. And I might specifically say that on a written anchor chart. So to support students, one of the strategies is to have the sentence stems and the if-then statements up on an anchor chart where they can refer to. And then the total physical response, TPR activity, which would be rolling the ball or different objects. Excuse me. And then here are your text and materials, and that's it. So those are the preliminary steps to creating a designated ELD lesson plan. After you've created all those preliminary steps, you're going to come in here and in detail, and preferably like in a bulleted or numbered list, you're going to explain in detail what you're going to do. I will introduce today's lesson by blah, 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 blah. And, try not to do it in paragraph form. Do it in a list series. It just makes it easier to follow. Then you're going to give the lesson, as I said earlier, come back, reflect on how the lesson went, and then submit this document in, it's under week 9 module, but it's not due until the end of week 10. I extended the due date because it took me so long to get this done. All right, thanks so much. I hope this was helpful.